So one of the first videos I made for this channel was discussing the way the Galactic Empire collapsed, specifically comparing the differences between the legend story and the canon story. But I figured today we could talk about some of the updates that have occurred to the way the Empire collapsed in canon and maybe discuss what's changed. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So I was pretty critical of the way the Galactic Empire collapsed in canon in my original video that many years ago. But I figured a lot has changed and it's time to maybe revisit the topic and specifically talk about how the Galactic Empire actually did collapse in canon. So we're going to start this story at the end of the original trilogy with the Battle of Endor and the death of Emperor Palpatine. That's basically when most of us can agree the Galactic Empire really began to collapse. Now, it's noteworthy that before this event, the seams began unraveling. Following the destruction of the first Death Star and the dissolving of the Imperial Senate, the sort of unity of the Galactic Empire started to fall into question, but it wasn't really until the Empire's defeat at the Battle of Endor that things really started to accelerate. With the Emperor's death, the contingency orders that he had put in place for the event of his death were put into action. These contingency orders, known as Operation Cinder, saw loyal Imperial worlds destroyed by Imperial forces. Now, it's said in canon that this is basically an if I can't have it, no one can destroy the galaxy since it failed to protect me kind of mentality, but ultimately the end result is it turned many loyal Imperial worlds against the Galactic Empire. The events of Operation Cinder actually shook the very basis of the Empire's political structure. Any remaining coherence of the Imperial ideas were sort of shattered by that event. The worlds that felt themselves to be loyal to the Galactic Empire felt very betrayed and maybe even a little afraid of what was left of the Empire. Where worlds that were already kind of on the fence and maybe thinking about joining the now New Republic were shifted even further towards the idea of joining this new faction. But the Empire still has the vast military superiority. However, there was issues within the Empire's vast military command structure. The regional governors, who were now responsible for maintaining control over their territory, were having a harder time keeping the military commanders under their umbrella, sort of under their thumbs. You see, some believe that the Empire was betraying its beliefs and the people it was intended to protect by carrying out things like Operation Cinder, and decided they were better off trying to serve as their own faction. Other warlords just simply saw the opportunity to grab power and tried to take it for themselves. The end result was the Empire descended into a bunch of squabbling warlords with a remnant state at its heart. The remnant state of the Galactic Empire continued fighting against the New Republic for a whole year. At the end of this year, however, the entirety of its forces were amassed around Jakku for one final battle, a battle that they ultimately lost. This is where the Galactic Civil War officially ended, but in a lot of ways it still kept raging elsewhere. Imperial warlords, while they had mostly been pushed away from the more populated core regions of the galaxy, were still a prominent force within the Outer Rim. This is where we see people like Moff Gideon, for example, fitting into this equation. And we know that 6 years after the Battle of Endor, these warlords are still a significant threat to the outer-lying systems of the Outer Rim. The areas that the New Republic really doesn't have the resources or the manpower to go in and patrol and regulate. As a result, these regions become havens for the remnants of the Galactic Empire, whether these be warlords operating as their own new faction, or those who really believe in the ideals of the Empire and believe that they're still fighting for the Imperial cause. But after that much time, with their supply lines basically being completely destroyed by the collapse of the Empire's economic system, these warlords were slowly withering away on their own, either fighting each other or trying to carry out raids against the New Republic and failing. There are some signs that we're going to see an Imperial resurgence right around that period of time. It sounds like Grand Admiral Thrawn is back, and like I've said in previous videos, I would still bet money that the plan is for Thrawn to come back and sort of do a canon adaptation of the original Thrawn trilogy, where he unifies several warlords and tries to carry out a nearly successful offensive against the New Republic. Now, that's not guaranteed by any means, that's just what I believe will happen next, but I think this is a much more reasonable way of showing the Galactic Empire's collapse. It does show it collapsing on paper fairly quickly, but that the vast Imperial military apparatus doesn't simply disappear, but instead remains fighting like a chicken with its head cut off. No coordination and no real unity. They're just a bunch of remaining military forces with no command, kind of doing their own thing. And some of them did keep fighting the New Republic for several years, and others sort of tried to cordon themselves off and maintain small separate states, or just continue doing really whatever they were doing before the Empire collapsed. We even see in some regions of the Outer Rim they seem to operate almost like criminal gangs. But this is a lot more realistic than the way Canon originally painted the collapse of the Empire. This massive galactic government basically completely vanishing over the course of a year and being almost erased from the galaxy within 3. This new picture of an empire fragmented and still trying to exist, even though it has no coordination, is a much more appropriate representation of the collapse of a government like the Galactic Empire, with a military like that used by the Galactic Empire. And that Imperial military was absolutely massive. One of the numbers I use to really show how big the Imperial military was is the number of Imperial-class Star Destroyers. During the reign of the Empire, the Galactic Empire built a total of 25,000 Imperial-class Star Destroyers, and these Star Destroyers became a symbol of the Empire's power. If you'd like to learn about the Imperial-class Star Destroyer, I'll leave a link up here to my video, which is an overview of both the Imperial 1 and the Imperial 2 class Star Destroyers. And I'd like you to let me know down in the comments whether you think this is a significant improvement over the way Canon originally depicted the collapse of the Empire, or do you kind of prefer it to be sort of quick and over very suddenly? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in Star Wars, leave it down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.